The first sound was the scream. It wasn't a sound of joy or surprise, but a raw, tearing noise that ripped through the placid afternoon air. One moment, the dedication of the new Northwood Community Garden was a portrait of civic harmony, sickly sweet scent of azaleas, mingling with the smell of fresh mulch, the gentle murmur of the crowd, the percussive pop of a photographer's flash capturing Mayor Thompson's practiced smile. The next, it was chaos. A man, gaunt and wiry with eyes that burned with a desperate fire, had vaulted the decorative rope barrier. He moved with a horrifying, single-minded purpose, a scarecrow lurching to life. Security, lulled by the peaceful atmosphere, was a fatal step behind. In his hand, something caught the August sun, not with the dull warmth of polished silver, but with the cold, hungry glint of sharpened steel, a kitchen knife. Time seemed to warp, stretching and compressing like an accordion. The crowd became a single, recoiling organism. The mayor's smile froze, then melted into a mask of disbelief. But Maya Castillo wasn't part of the crowd. Not really. At 22, off-duty from a grueling 10-hour shift as a certified nursing assistant, she was simply there to see the new garden her grandmother had been talking about for weeks. Dressed in her plain blue scrubs, she was an anonymous face in the front row, a ghost of the hospital ward, just trying to feel the sun on her skin. Then the man lunged, and something ancient and protective inside Maya took over. It wasn't a thought. It was a physical imperative, a command that bypassed her brain and shot directly into her muscles. While everyone else moved back, she moved forward. She didn't see a mayor or a politician. She saw a person in danger. She saw a patient. With a strength she didn't know she possessed, she shoved Mayor Thompson's shoulder, sending the surprised man stumbling backward over a row of potted marigolds. The attacker, his target suddenly displaced, let out a grunt of fury. The arm with the knife came down in a vicious, stabbing arc, aimed at where the mayor's chest had been a second before. Maya's arm came up. Her CNA training had taught her about sterile fields and pressure ulcers, not knife fights. But it had taught her to intervene, to place herself between harm and healing. Her left forearm, thin but solid, met the man's wrist. The impact was a jarring shock that radiated up to her shoulder. She felt a searing, electric pain as the blade, cheated of its primary target, sliced through the fabric of her sleeve and deep into the flesh below. A hot, wet sensation bloomed across her arm. The world erupted back into full-speed motion. Two large security guards slammed into the attacker, driving him to the ground. The knife clattered onto the pristine new paving stones. Maya staggered back, her own momentum spent, and collapsed onto the grass. She looked down at her arm, at the deep, crimson line welling with blood that soaked her sleeve, and dripped onto the manicured lawn. Shock began its cold creep through her veins, muting the pain, replacing it with a strange, buzzing detachment. Paramedics, who had been on standby for the event, rushed toward the mayor. Then, seeing he was unharmed, were directed toward her. As one of them knelt, cutting away her sleeve, a police officer loomed over her. He wasn't looking at her with concern. His eyes were narrow, scanning her face with a hard, professional suspicion. "Did you know him?" The officer's voice was a gravelly intrusion into her shock. "The attacker. Did you know him? Why were you so close to the mayor?" Maya looked up from her bleeding arm, the paramedic's latex-gloved hands a blur. The question didn't register at first. It was nonsensical. She had just been stabbed saving a man's life, and the first question from the law was an accusation. The buzzing in her ears grew louder. Confusion, hurt, and a dawning, chilling sense of injustice began to eclipse the physical pain. This was only the beginning. The piercing wail of the ambulance siren sliced through the air, but as it carried her away from the scene of her heroism, the sound seemed to morph, to deepen and steady. It transitioned into the rhythmic, reassuring beep of a hospital heart monitor, pulling her back 5 years into a memory that was the bedrock of her entire existence. She was 17, sitting in a vinyl chair that stuck to the back of her legs. The room smelled of antiseptic and something faintly, sadly floral from a wilting bouquet on the windowsill. Her mother lay in the bed, a frail landscape under a thin white sheet, tethered to life by a web of clear tubes. Her mother's illness had been a long, slow-motion storm that had hollowed out their family, leaving Maya feeling powerless. Then, a nurse named Linda had entered. She wasn't young or glamorous. She was a woman in her 50s with comfortable shoes and tired, kind eyes. She moved with an unhurried competence that was its own form of magic. While doctors came and went in a flurry of jargon, Linda spoke to her mother. She fluffed her pillow, adjusted the IV drip with a practiced twist of her wrist, and explained to a terrified Maya what the beeping machine meant, her voice a calm anchor in a sea of fear. "It just means her heart is strong," Linda had said, pointing to the green line dancing across the monitor. "It's fighting, and we're fighting with her." In that moment, Maya saw it. She saw the power not of medicine, but of care. It was a tangible force, as real as any drug. It was dignity. It was compassion. It was placing your hands on someone's suffering and making it a little more bearable. A seed was planted in the barren ground of her grief. "I want to do that." That seed had grown into the life she now lived. A life measured in bus schedules and textbooks with cracked spines. The alarm at 4:30 a.m., a brutal summons to the dark. The two bus, crowded with the city's other early risers, their faces weary in the pre-dawn gloom. The grueling, thankless, beautiful work of a CNA at City General Hospital. Changing soiled linens, patiently spoon-feeding a man who could no longer hold a fork, holding the hand of a woman whose family never visited, absorbing the grief and fear and frustration of a dozen souls every single day. It was work that wore you down to the bone, but built up your spirit. And then, after the shifts, it was City Community College. The fluorescent hum of the library, the weight of the anatomy textbook in her lap, her notes a frantic scrawl of terms like brachial plexus and dorsal cavity. She would stare at the glossy brochures for the City University RN program, the tuition numbers, 12-0, a semester figure so astronomical it felt like a cruel joke. It was a wall between her and her dream, a wall built of dollars and cents. But she kept studying, kept working, kept saving the pitifully small amounts left over after rent and bills. Because she remembered Linda. She remembered the power of a kind hand and a steady voice. That was the dream. It was the only thing that mattered. Now, lying in the back of the ambulance, the dream felt a million miles away. The paramedic wrapped her bleeding arm, his movements efficient but impersonal. The siren wailed on, carrying her back to the city, back to the system she served, a system that was about to show her its true face. The emergency room at City General was a familiar chaos of beeps, shouts, and the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. For Maya, it was deeply ironic to be on this side of the curtain, a patient in the very place where she worked. The resident who stitched her up was young, his focus intense as he meticulously threaded the needle through her skin. 14 stitches. He worked with a professional detachment that bordered on cold, rattling off aftercare instructions as if he were reading from a script. "Keep it clean, keep it dry. Here's a prescription for a broad-spectrum antibiotic and something for the pain. You'll be able to get this filled at the hospital pharmacy." He handed her the slip of paper. She knew, with a sinking feeling, that even with her employee discount, the copay would be the cost of a week's groceries. Before she could even process this, a figure appeared at the curtained doorway. It was Mr. Davies, the hospital's risk management administrator. He was a man in his 50s with a perpetually worried expression, as if he personally felt the weight of every potential lawsuit against the hospital. He wasn't carrying flowers or a card. He was carrying a clipboard. "Maya," he said, his voice a low, urgent murmur. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't even look at the freshly stitched and bandaged wound on her arm. His eyes darted around the ER bay, as if checking for spies. "Can we speak in my office for a moment?" The office was a small, sterile box, dominated by a large metal filing cabinet. Davies closed the door, the click of the latch sounding unnervingly final. He gestured for her to sit, then began pacing. "Maya, I've reviewed the preliminary media reports," he began, not meeting her eyes. This is not an ideal optic for the hospital." "An optic?" Maya asked, her voice raspy. The pain medication was making her feel woozy, but his words cut through the haze. "You're an employee, a CNA. You are not a member of the mayor's security detail. By intervening, you created a situation of immense liability," he said, his words precise and devoid of any warmth. "Our insurance, our protocols, they do not cover this. You put the hospital in a legally and financially compromising position." The accusation was so stunning, so profoundly unfair, that Maya could only stare. She had acted as a human being, and he was talking to her as if she were a faulty piece of equipment. He slid the clipboard he was holding onto the desk in front of her. It was an official hospital incident report form. "I need you to be very, very careful how you phrase this," he said, tapping a pen on the top line. You need to state unequivocally that you were acting as a private citizen, that your actions were completely unrelated to your employment at City General, that you were on your own time, in your own capacity. Do you understand the importance of this distinction? He was coaching her. He was telling her to lie by omission, to legally sever herself from the institution she gave her life to, all to protect its bottom line. The rage began as a slow burn in her chest, a hot, acrid feeling that momentarily eclipsed the throbbing in her arm. He wasn't her advocate. He was the hospital's lawyer, and she was the problem he needed to solve. "Mr. Davies," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "A man was about to be stabbed. I just reacted. And that reaction, however well-intentioned, has consequences for this institution," he said coolly. "Fill out the form, Maya, for everyone's sake." He left the office, leaving her alone with the form, the pen, and the bitter taste of institutional cowardice. Her ordeal was far from over. From the hospital, she was instructed to go directly to the 12th precinct for a formal statement. The interrogation room was a cliché of bleakness. Gray walls, a scuffed metal table, 2 chairs bolted to the floor. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant, and the relentless, low-frequency hum of the ballast in the ceiling light fixture seemed designed to fray the nerves. Detective Harding entered without a knock. He was a big man who seemed to take up all the air in the small room. He dropped a thick file onto the table with a thud that made Maya jump. He didn't introduce himself. He just sat, opened the file, and began. His voice was a monotone, a tool he used to sand away at a suspect's composure. "Let's go over this again from the top," he said, clicking his pen. "Maya Castillo, 22, employed as a certified nursing assistant at City General Hospital. You stated you were at the event because your grandmother was interested in the garden." "Yes, that's right." "You work at a city-funded hospital," he stated, not as a question, but as an accusation. "It's public knowledge that City General has been facing significant budget cuts. We've seen protests, union grievances. Do you have any personal grievances with your employer? With the city's handling of the budget?" The question blindsided her. He was trying to build a motive. "No, I mean, nobody likes cuts, but no, I love my job." "You love your job," he repeated slowly, writing it down as if it were a suspicious statement. "The attacker, one Arthur Evans, 49, terminated from a city sanitation job 6 weeks ago due to departmental restructuring. That's a budget cut, isn't it? Ever cross paths with Mr. Evans? Ever treat him at the hospital? A family member?" "I have no idea. I've never seen him before in my life," Maya insisted, her frustration growing. "It's quite a move, shoving the mayor of the city," Harding mused, leaning back in his chair, his eyes finally locking on hers. They were cold, devoid of sympathy. "Takes a lot of nerve. You're a young woman, not a trained bodyguard. Seems ambitious. You looking for a commendation? A bit of media attention? A GoFundMe page, maybe?" The implication was disgusting. He was twisting her act of self-sacrifice into a calculated grab for fame and money. The injustice of it was a physical thing, a tightening in her throat. "I was trying to stop him from getting killed," she said, her voice rising despite her efforts to control it. "That's it. That's the whole story." "People's stories change," Harding said, his voice flat. He spent another hour going over the same ground, twisting her words, rephrasing his insinuations. He asked about her finances, her friends, her family. By the time he was done, she felt hollowed out, as if she'd been psychologically strip-searched. He stood up, closing the file. "All right, we'll be in touch. Don't leave town." It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. She walked out of the precinct into the late afternoon sun, feeling less like a hero and more like a paroled criminal. Her arm ached, her head pounded, and her spirit felt bruised and battered. She thought foolishly that the worst must be over. An hour later, her phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number with a City Hall exchange. A clipped, professional voice on the other end informed her that Deputy Mayor Evelyn Reed wished to see her. A car was already on its way. Maya felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was it, a proper thank you, a chance to clear the air. The hope died the moment she stepped into Evelyn Reed's office. It was on the top floor of City Hall, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the city Maya served from its gutters. The furniture was minimalist and brutally expensive. The air itself felt different, cool, silent, and filtered. Evelyn Reed was the room personified. In her late 40s, She was dressed in a razor-sharp charcoal pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. Her smile was a work of architectural precision, and it did not, for a single moment, reach her cold, intelligent eyes. "Ms. Castillo, Maya, please come in," she said, her voice smooth as polished marble. She gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than Maya's rent for a year. "Can I get you some water? It's from a spring in Norway." Maya shook her head, feeling utterly out of place. "Maya, I want you to know, on behalf of the mayor's office, that the city owes you a profound debt of gratitude," Reed began, her tone a perfect symphony of sincerity. "The mayor is so incredibly grateful. It was an act of astonishing bravery." The praise felt good, for a second, before Reed's tone shifted, becoming more conspiratorial, more serious. "However, the situation, as you can imagine, is delicate. The optics are paramount. We have a city to run, and public confidence is everything. We need to control the narrative." The phrase, "control the narrative," sent a chill down Maya's spine. Reed slid a thick document, bound in a blue legal cover, across the vast expanse of her mahogany desk. It was a non-disclosure agreement. In situations of this nature, discretion is key. For your protection as much as ours, we need to ensure a consistent, unified message. Next to the NDA, she placed a check. Maya didn't have to look closely to see the amount written in crisp, blue ink, 50. "The mayor's office would like to make a personal contribution to you," Reed explained, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "To help with your medical expenses, your time off work, a token of our gratitude. Once you sign the NDA, of course the funds are yours." Maya looked from the check to the NDA, then to Evelyn Reed's placid, expectant face, and she understood. This wasn't a thank you. This was a transaction. This was a muzzle. The amount was a calculated insult, just enough to seem generous to an outsider, but not enough to change anything. It was hush money. The slow-burning rage that had been building all day finally ignited. "You want me to be silent?" Maya asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You think I did this for money?" Reed's smile tightened infinitesimally at the edges. "I think you're a smart young woman who understands how the world works." "No," Maya said, her voice gaining strength. She pushed the check and the NDA back across the desk. "No, I'm not signing anything. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and I won't be told to hide that." The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The mask of political grace didn't just slip, it evaporated. Evelyn Reed's eyes turned to chips of ice. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold, predatory fury. "Let me be very clear, Miss Castillo," she said, her voice now stripped of all warmth. "You are a CNA at a city hospital that is currently undergoing strenuous budget reviews. I sign off on those reviews. Your position, the positions of your friends, the very funding of your department, it's all rather tenuous. A heroic narrative is a wonderful, simple thing. But a complicated one, where the hero becomes uncooperative and starts having opinions, that's messy. And messy things, Ms. Castillo," she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a menacing purr, "messy things get cleaned up." The threat hung in the silent, expensive air between them. It was a perfect, untraceable threat, aimed directly at the heart of Maya's dream. She had saved the mayor's life, and in return, his right hand was threatening to destroy hers. Maya walked out of that opulent office, not just disillusioned, but truly, deeply afraid. Maya's apartment was a small, third-floor walk-up that was her entire world. It was her sanctuary. But that night, it felt like a cage. She sat on her second-hand couch, a bag of frozen peas wrapped in a dish towel pressed against her throbbing arm. The local news was on, the volume low. The initial reports were still glowing, painting her as the Angel of Northwood, the hero CNA. It felt like a story about someone else. Then her phone buzzed, and again, a cascade of notifications. A friend had tagged her in a post. She clicked on it. It was a link to an article from a notorious city blog called The City Hall Cynic, known for its contrarian, acid-tongued takes. The headline was a punch to the gut. The mayor's savior? More to the story? Her heart pounded as she read. The article, citing multiple high-level anonymous sources from within City Hall, was a meticulous and vicious character assassination. It was Evelyn Reed's work. She could feel her fingerprints all over the slimy prose. While the city celebrates Maya Castillo, sources are urging caution, the article began. Questions are being raised about why Castillo, a low-level hospital employee, was positioned so close to the mayor at a secured event. It got worse. The article had somehow unearthed a minor, sealed juvenile infraction. When Maya was 16, grieving and angry after her mother's first major health scare, she'd been caught shoplifting a bottle of perfume. The charges were dropped after she did community service. The blog presented it as, "A sealed record reveals a history of antisocial behavior and clashes with authority." It weaponized her job. Is this a case of a disgruntled city employee? Castillo works at the chronically underfunded City General, a hotbed of union agitation. Was this a desperate bid for attention, or something more? The final paragraph was the kill shot, a direct injection of Reed's poison. Most disturbingly, a source close to the mayor's office claims that, in a private meeting today, Ms. Castillo refused modest assistance for her injury and instead demanded a significant financial reward for her actions, an attempt to leverage her newfound fame that left officials stunned. It painted her as an extortionist, a fraud, a liar. She clicked over to her social media page. It was a war zone. The glowing comments from the afternoon were being buried under an avalanche of filth. Knew it was too good to be true. Typical fame whore. So she's a criminal, and she's trying to shake down the mayor? Lock her up. My cousin works at City Hall, he said. She's totally unstable. The public, the same anonymous entity that had been ready to build a statue in her honor a few hours ago, had turned on her with the ferocity of a rabid wolf pack. The words blurred on the screen through her tears. The walls of her apartment, her sanctuary, felt like they were closing in. She curled into a ball on the couch, the frozen peas forgotten, and sobbed. It was a raw, hopeless sound of a person who had tried to do good in the world and was being punished for it. This was her lowest point, a profound and terrifying isolation. Just as the despair threatened to swallow her whole, her phone rang again. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, assuming it was another reporter or a troll who had gotten her number. But something made her answer. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice wrecked. "Is this Miss Maya Castillo?" a man's voice asked. It was calm, deep, and steady. "Who is this?" "My name is Robert Miller. I'm a member of the city council," the voice said. Maya's mind went blank. "I just read that garbage article from the cynic Ms. Castillo, and I wanted you to hear it from me directly. I don't believe a single word of it." Maya sat up, wiping her eyes. "What?" "I've been on the council for 20 years, Miller continued, a note of weary frustration in his voice. "I've seen Evelyn Reed's handiwork before. She leaves the same tracks every time. This is what she does to people who don't fit into her neat little press releases. She destroys them." Hearing someone else say it, someone with power, was like a gulp of fresh air in a sealed room. It was validation. "She's trying to erase you," Miller said, his voice hardening. "And tomorrow she's going to finish the job. There's a city council meeting at 3 p.m. to approve the new city budget. I know for a fact that she plans to make a brief, sanitized statement about the unfortunate incident, thank the police, and move on. By 3:15, officially, you will no longer exist." "What can I do?" Maya asked, the question feeling impossibly naive. "You can show up," Miller said simply. "The council chambers are a public space. You have a right to be there. You have a right to be heard. She's counting on you to be scared. She's counting on you to hide. Don't let her win." The call ended. Maya stared at the darkened screen of her phone. She was terrified. The thought of facing those people, of walking into a room where everyone either hated her or was afraid of her, was nauseating. But Miller's words had planted a new seed next to the one of despair. It was a tiny, fragile thing, but it was there, a seed of fight. The next morning, the world felt hostile. She had to go to work. She couldn't afford to miss a shift, suspension or not. As she walked into the hospital locker room, the air grew thick with a sudden, pointed silence. Her coworkers, the women she shared lunches and complaints and triumphs with, suddenly found their shoes fascinating. They avoided her eyes. They had all seen the article. They had seen the comments. The whispers that followed her down the hall were like tiny, sharp stones thrown at her back. The isolation was no longer just digital. It was real and suffocating. She had just finished changing into her scrubs when Mr. Davies appeared, blocking the doorway. He had the same anxious look on his face, but this time it was mixed with a grim sort of resolution. "Maya, I saw the news," he said, his voice low. "The blog, the allegations. This is a public relations disaster. This is exactly what I was worried about. It's not true, Maya said, her voice flat. True doesn't matter, Davies shot back, his voice cracking with stress. Perception matters. I've been getting calls from the deputy mayor's office all morning. I think it's best if you take a leave of absence, unpaid, effective immediately, until this whole thing blows over. He was suspending her, caving to the pressure, pushing her out. And that was it. That was the final straw. All the pain, the exhaustion, the fear, and the cascading injustices of the past 24 hours didn't break her. They forged her. Something inside her, something she didn't know she had, hardened into steel. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in charge. She looked Mr. Davies directly in the eye. The nervous, accommodating girl from his office yesterday was gone. No, she said. The word was quiet, but it had the density of granite. Davies blinked. I'm sorry? I'm not taking a leave of absence. I didn't do anything wrong. If you want to fire me for saving a man's life, then you go right ahead and fire me. Put it in writing. But I am not going to disappear to make things more convenient for you or for Evelyn Reed. She unzipped the front of her scrubs, pulled them off, and folded them with deliberate, steady hands. She placed them in her locker. Then she turned back to her stunned administrator. I have somewhere to be at 3 o'clock, she said. She walked past him, out of the locker room, and down the long, sterile hallway. She didn't look back. She was no longer a victim of the story. She was going to become its author. The city council chambers were designed to intimidate. The walls were paneled in dark, solemn wood that rose to a vaulted ceiling, making anyone on the floor feel small. The room was a theater of power, and on this day, it was sold out. The public gallery was packed with a tense mix of city employees, curious citizens, and a significant contingent of press, their cameras poised like vultures on a branch. Maya walked in at 2:55 p.m. She wore a simple black blouse and gray slacks, her only accessory the white bandage and sling on her left arm. She felt 100 pairs of eyes turned to her, a wave of murmurs rippling through the crowd. She could feel their judgment, their curiosity, their pity. She ignored it all, her gaze fixed forward. She spotted Councilman Miller sitting at the long, curved dais. He met her eyes and gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. It was enough. She found an empty seat in the back row. From her vantage point, she could see Evelyn Reed at the table reserved for the mayor's staff. Reed was the picture of calm control, whispering instructions to an aide, her posture perfect. But then she glanced toward the gallery, her eyes scanning the crowd, and she saw Maya. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Maya saw a flash of pure, undiluted venom in Reed's eyes, the fury of a predator whose prey had refused to die. The mask snapped back into place, but Maya had seen it. It confirmed everything. The meeting began with the tedious drone of procedural matters. The council president, a man with a booming voice and a bored expression, moved through the agenda items. Finally, he arrived at the point. Next, we have a statement from the deputy mayor's office regarding the incident at the Northwood Garden dedication, after which we will move to vote on the proposed city budget. Evelyn Reed walked to the podium with the fluid, confident stride of a woman who owned every room she entered. She arranged her notes, took a sip of water, and smiled warmly at the council members. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council, she began, her voice a smooth, persuasive melody. Yesterday, our city faced a moment of crisis. A disturbed individual attempted to inflict harm upon our mayor. But in that moment of darkness, we also saw the best of our city. We saw the rapid, professional response of our police force, who neutralized the threat with exemplary skill. We saw our first responders provide immediate and excellent care. It is a testament to the strength and resilience of our city's infrastructure and the brave people who serve it. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. To honor that service, and to ensure the continued well-being of all who work for this great city, the mayor's office will be spearheading a new fund. We will be making a significant, 6-figure donation to launch a new, synergistic public-private wellness initiative for all city employees. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. She praised the system, the uniforms, the abstract concepts. She announced a vague, unaccountable fund, and she never once said Maya's name. With a few hundred well-chosen words, she was wiping Maya from the official record, replacing her with a budget line item. She was finishing her speech, preparing to glide back to her seat, her victory seemingly total. Mr. President! The voice cut through the room, sharp and indignant. It was Councilman Miller. He was on his feet. Mr. President, I believe the deputy mayor has omitted a crucial detail in her otherwise comprehensive summary. The council president looked annoyed. Councilman Miller, the deputy mayor's statement is concluded. With all due respect, Miller pressed on, his voice ringing with conviction. I believe we're missing a key part of this story. We're missing the actual person who saved the mayor's life. The person who took the knife. A young woman named Maya Castillo, who was sitting right there in the gallery. He pointed, directly at Maya. A collective gasp went through the room. Every head, every camera swiveled to the back row. Maya felt the heat of 100 spotlights on her face. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, but she met their stares, her heart hammering against her ribs. Evelyn Reed's face was a stony mask. Councilman, this is highly inappropriate. There are privacy concerns. Privacy? Miller's voice dripped with scorn. Or a cover-up? Which is it, Miss Reed? He held up his city-issued tablet. Because I was forwarded a rather interesting email this morning. It seems a conscientious staffer in your own office was concerned about a directive they received. An email from the desk of the deputy mayor, sent at 10:47 p.m. last night, instructing her communications team to, and I quote, pivot the narrative away from the girl and to feed background to friendly press to complicate her profile. It also suggests, and I quote again, exploring the disgruntled employee angle. The room erupted. Shouts of shame and let her speak came from the public gallery. The press was in a feeding frenzy, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions at Reed. Is this what we call public service now, Ms. Reed? Miller thundered, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings. Is this how we treat our heroes? By slandering them in the press and threatening their jobs? Is that the narrative you wanted to control? Reed was speechless, her perfect composure finally shattered. She stood at the podium, her face pale, her eyes darting around for an escape that wasn't there. Miller turned his gaze to Maya, his voice softened. Ms. Castillo, you have the floor, if you would like it. For a moment, Maya was paralyzed. This was it, the precipice. Then she thought of her mother, of the nurse named Linda, of the promise she'd made to herself. She stood up on trembling legs and walked the long aisle to the public podium. The room fell into a dead silence. She gripped the sides of the podium to steady her hands. She had no notes, no speech. There was only the raw, burning truth. My name is Maya Castillo, she began, her voice quiet but clear, carried by the microphone throughout the chamber. I'm a CNA at City General. I decided I wanted to be a nurse when I was 17, when my mother was sick. A nurse showed me that caring for someone is the most important job in the world. She took a shaky breath. Yesterday, I saw a man who needed help, the mayor. So I helped him. I didn't think about it. I just did it. It's what I'm trained to do. It's who I am. Her voice grew stronger, fueled by the indignation she had suppressed for 24 hours. And for that, I was treated like a criminal by the police. I was reprimanded by my boss for creating a liability. I was offered $5,000 and an NDA by Deputy Mayor Reed to buy my silence. And when I refused, she threatened my job and leaked lies about me to the press to destroy my reputation. I was suspended from the job I loved this morning. Tears welled in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She looked past the council, past the cameras, at the citizens in the gallery. I didn't ask for a reward. I didn't ask for attention. I just did what I thought was right. All I wanted was to be treated with dignity. Instead, my name has been dragged through the mud, my career is threatened, and my character has been questioned, all to control a narrative. She leaned into the microphone, her voice now ringing with a power that stunned the room into silence. My only question to you is, what is that narrative worth? She finished. The silence that followed was absolute, a profound, breathless vacuum. Then, a single person in the gallery began to clap, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire public gallery was on its feet, a thunderous, rolling ovation that was a judgment and a verdict all in one. Mayor Thompson, who had been sitting frozen in his chair looking deeply uncomfortable, saw his political life flashing before his eyes. He saw the tide turn, and he knew he had to ride it or be drowned. He stood up abruptly, strode past the ghost-white face of Evelyn Reed, and walked directly to Maya at the podium. He put a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was both fatherly and deeply political. He leaned into the microphone, his voice booming with practiced authority. "Ms. Maya Castillo is a true American hero," he declared, his eyes sweeping the room. "What she has just described is an unforgivable, systemic, bureaucratic failure. This city does not treat its heroes this way. I will be launching a full, independent investigation into these allegations, effective immediately." He paused for effect, then looked at Maya with a warm smile. "But that is not enough. This city must do more than investigate its mistakes. It must celebrate its champions. I have been told that Miss Castillo's dream is to become a registered nurse." He turned to the council. "Therefore, I propose we go one step further. I propose the City Council creates, right here, right now, the Maya Castillo Civic Courage Scholarship, a full 4-year scholarship to the City University School of Nursing, to be awarded to its first recipient, Ms. Castillo, effective immediately." Councilman Miller, a broad grin on his face, slammed his hand on his desk. "I second that motion." The council president, seeing the inevitable, called for the vote. A chorus of resounding, enthusiastic ayes echoed through the chamber. There were no nays. It was unanimous. The gavel came down. The title was fulfilled. The crowd roared its approval. The camera flashes were blinding. In the eye of the storm stood Maya, tears finally streaming down her face, not of pain or fear, but of shock, of relief, of overwhelming, bone-deep vindication. Justice, delivered in the full glare of the public eye, had been done. The fallout was swift and brutal, a political wildfire fanned by the winds of public outrage. The next morning's news cycle was dominated by one story. A montage of images told the tale. Evelyn Reed, her face a mask of fury, shoving her way through a throng of reporters outside City Hall, her only comment a snarled, "No comment." 2 days later, a small article on page 12 of the city paper announced her resignation for personal reasons. Mr. Davies of City General was captured in a photo, looking panicked on his cell phone. It ran alongside a press release from the hospital, effusively praising their heroic and valued employee, Maya Castillo, and announcing a new internal review of administrative protocols. A grainy photo showed Detective Harding, shoulders slumped, walking into his captain's office, the door closing firmly behind him. And a final, clear shot showed Councilman Miller shaking Maya's hand on the steps of City Hall, the sun on their faces. "You did good, kid," he'd told her, his voice gruff with emotion. "You reminded them what this is all about." The hate mail stopped. The social media trolls went silent. In their place came an outpouring of support. A local coffee shop offered her free coffee for life. The police union issued a formal apology for Harding's unprofessional conduct. But for Maya, the real victory wasn't in the headlines or the apologies. It was quieter. The scene shifts. It's 3 weeks later. The air in the large lecture hall at City University's School of Nursing is cool and smells of old paper and new beginnings. Maya sits in the third row, not the back. She's wearing a crisp, new, navy blue nursing school uniform. A laptop is open in front of her, and she's typing notes as the professor discusses the intricacies of the circulatory system. She is focused, engaged, a student among students. She looks rested. The deep, weary lines of exhaustion that had seemed permanently etched around her eyes are gone. The weight has been lifted. When the lecture ends, she packs her bag and walks out into the bright September afternoon. The campus quad is bustling with the energy of 1,000 futures. She finds a bench and sits for a moment, letting the sun warm her face. She looks down at her left forearm. The stitches are out. In their place is a scar, a thin, pale, pink line against her olive skin. It no longer throbs with pain. She traces its length with the fingers of her other hand. It isn't a mark of victimization. It's a reminder. It's the receipt for her courage. It is the cost she paid, a price that, in the end, bought her not just her dream, but her own unshakable sense of self. She looks up, past the manicured lawns and old brick buildings of the university, toward the distant, glittering towers of the city skyline. It's the same skyline she had seen from the cold, intimidating window of Evelyn Reed's office. It doesn't look intimidating anymore. It looks like her city, a place of deep flaws and profound resilience. A place she fought for, and in doing so, had claimed a piece of. A place where she was finally, truly, on the path to becoming the person she was always meant to be. The silence that surrounds her now is not the silence of isolation, but the quiet, steady peace of a hard-won beginning.